Okay, welcome back to Introduction to Entrepreneurship. And today we're going to talk about customer validation and needs analysis. So what have we covered in the class so far? Well, so far we've kind of covered entrepreneurship. What is it? What it looks like? Kind of the mindset and the characteristics that entrepreneurs have. A little bit about ideas, where to find them, how to find them, the understanding that, they're not light bulb moments typically, that they're typically iterated over time. Kind of some basic criteria that you can evaluate ideas against to figure out, is the idea I have a good idea, a bad idea? So what's next after this? So kind of we've learned about an entrepreneur, what they look like, where to find ideas, what's next? Today we're going to talk about how you validate a customer needs. So how do you make sure that what a customer needs is actually the type of product you're building? So there's three essential things that you're going to need to validate when you do customer validation. First is you have to validate the problem. We're going to get into each one of these in detail, so don't worry too much right now about saying, well, wait, we just did a quick overview of that. No, so you're going to validate the problem. We're going to talk about that in detail in a minute. You're going to validate the market. In other words, how big is the market? Is this market large enough for me to make the investment into developing the solution I'm trying to develop that I can actually make money from my idea? And then you're going to validate your solution. Does my solution actually impact the market like I think it does? And we're going to try to move all of these three things from a validation perspective. Our goal is to move from I thinks to I knows. And you're going to hear me say that a lot. The more you say I think when you're talking about a new business, that just means it's the less you know, which means if you look at things on a risk curve, that you're taking more risk. Okay, so why do we do customer validation at all? I mean, you might be sitting there saying, well, I have this great idea and I think it's great, so I don't care what my customers think. Well, a lot of actual business owners think that, and that typically gets them in trouble. So here's why we do it. You've made a bunch of assumptions typically when you're starting a business. You're assuming you can sell something for a certain price. You're assuming people will buy in certain quantities. You're assuming that certain demographics of population will actually buy what you're selling. Well, all of those are assumptions. You're trying to prove that your assumptions are correct before, notice that word is bolded, before you spend too much time and too much money on an idea. And don't forget, time equals money. If you're spending time working on one idea, that's opportunity cost that you have that you're not spending working on another. So it's really important that when you're doing this, you're trying to validate, the why. It helps you avoid building a product that no one wants. This happens a lot in technology. Someone will design a technology solution and they'll build it all up. And if you've ever watched the show Silicon Valley, there's some classic funny video clips in Silicon Valley about where the technical people have built something and then they roll it out to the customers. They do customer focus groups and the customers are like, we don't get it. And you'll hear the engineers say, well, yeah, of course they don't get it. They're not engineers. And you can see the marketing people look at them and go, but you didn't build this for engineers. You built it for regular people, and all of a sudden light bulbs go off. So you have to avoid building a product that no one wants. You have to figure out a way to change either your product or your service or your method of delivery early on. Again, early on, because you want to do things early before you spend too much time and money. You don't want to get into this thing and a year in start realizing, wow, I've rolled out the wrong colors, I've rolled out the wrong shapes, I've rolled out the wrong firmness, whatever it is that are some key things to your product. And it also helps you iterate. One of the things to realize is in product development and service development, iteration is key. It's absolutely okay to get it wrong. The goal is to get it out there, get feedback, iterate, change, and adapt. And one of the first things we talked about in this course was, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing. And the answer was wrong, because you want to get stuff into the market, excuse me, and then you want to get feedback on that stuff so that you can figure out, what do I need to change now? How can I adapt my product early so that you offer a better solution to the marketplace? So that's why we're doing it. So what we're doing is we're actually going to go get hard evidence regarding the possible sources of our idea and of our business. We're going to go try to do hard evidence. We're going to go try to figure out, will customers actually buy my product? Your product. Will they buy it? Not are they interested in it, but will they actually spend money on it? Again, we're going to validate all the information that you think you know. We're moving I thinks to I knows. How do we do this? We're going to get out of the building. We're going to go into all of this in a little bit more detail. You got to get out of the building. Notice building is in quotes, meaning you have to get out of your workshop. You have to get out of your office building. You have to get out of your kitchen. You have to get out of whatever constraints are surrounding your business, and you have to go talk to the real customers. You actually have to talk to people and ask them questions. And we're going to go into later on today a little bit about the types of questions that you want to ask. You can't just talk to friends and family. You don't get great information from friends and family. Remember, friends and family typically want to support you, want to love you, want to say, of course, your idea is great. You're not going to get great customer validation information from friends and family. You have to go talk to people who are not connected to you, which is why we talked about some of the networking classes earlier. You're going to use networking and all sorts of other resources to go figure out, who can I talk to? Remember the fish where the fish are comment? When you're going to go try to validate an idea, you should be trying to fish, meaning talk to people where the fish are, wherever those people would be for your product and service. So if you're going to open up a restaurant, try to get to an area where a bunch of people going to restaurants are walking around. If you're going to be opening up a sports facility, go to people that are hanging around sports facilities, et cetera, et cetera. You got to find natural customers. You know, the people whose problems you're solving, and that's what we were just talking about. If you're creating a better laundry detergent, go to a laundromat. Those are the people who are natural customers of yours. You have to know the people whose problem you're solving. If you don't know them, if you don't know their demographics, their buying habits, what motivates them to buy. Remember, we had talked about earlier in the course, the 5 C's, circumstance, criteria, etc. If you don't know the why the person's buying, then you don't really know how to design a solution to make sure that you're answering and solving their problem. Okay, so you got to validate the problem. We talked about 3 things. Let's start with validate the problem. So a problem solution should be centric to your idea. And most of you are like, well, duh, of course. But you'd be surprised how many people have an idea and they think it's solving one problem, and then in reality, it's solving another. And let's talk about that. I think we've already kind of talked about a few things when we were talking about the 5 C's. I mean, what was Rogaine actually brought to market? What was the idea? The idea was that Rogaine would be a product that was going to work for high blood pressure. But in reality, Rogaine ended up growing hair. So it's a problem solution needs to be centric to your idea. So that's not a big deal. Solve a problem important to your market. If you think a problem is important, but it's not important to the actual customers who would be buying your product, meaning if the problem is not important enough to solve that somebody would spend money on it, then you're not solving a problem that's important enough to your customers or to your market. And make sure it's why customers seek you out. So if you're saying that you are an expert in XYZ, fill in the blank, make sure that your profile, your LinkedIn, your experience, everything supports this is why customers would seek you out. If you say we offer the best chocolate chip cookies going, then make sure you offer the best chocolate chip cookies going. Not when someone comes to your shop, you offer 15 other foods and chocolate chip cookies is this buy item or byline item on your menu. It needs to be central to your service offering. How do you validate the problem? We've already talked about this. You go out and you speak to potential customers and you repeat and you repeat and you repeat and you repeat. You keep talking to people. Ask customers the right questions. I should have put that in quotes, the right questions. We're going to talk about a little bit later on what the right questions are. But what that means is you're not asking yes/no questions. There's no yes/no's because that doesn't get you any details. You want to ask open-ended questions to customers where they can provide you a lot of detail and a lot of information about the type of solution you're offering. Discover what the problem really is. When you ask customers open-ended questions, you figure out actually what the problem really is and how important is it to them to have it solved. While someone might say, if you're talking to a mother or a father and you're at a park and they're playing with their child and they're talking to you and they're like, yeah, I really wish there was some solution out there that had the ability for me to make play dates for my child easier. It would be great if I knew every child in my neighborhood and when they preferred play dates and what their hobbies were, and it would be some way for me to create this play date thing. And you think, oh, I'm going to create, a play date app. Is the problem really that they don't know people? That's what you heard. Is the problem really that the people aren't available? Is it that they don't know their hobbies? You have to be asking enough questions to drill into what really is the problem that's being solved. And you have to be asking, I wonder if the person would be willing to pay for this. So you're having to ask open-ended questions to say, well, I know you're interested in that. Is that a solution? How much would you pay for a solution for that? Have you thought about what types of solutions would be good for that, et cetera? And then you have to really listen. Notice I said listen, exclamation. Yes, listen to the answers, because their answers then drive your next question. So make sure you're listening well. Got to validate the market. What's the total market potential? Let's keep on with that same example. So you talk to a mom and dad at a park. They wished there was an app available for, their young children to be able to do play dates easier. So what is the total market potential? How many young parents are there? How many young children are there? You do your math on that. Your total market potential is whatever you have validated through questions, what someone would pay for your service, times the total number of customers potentially in the market. That gets you your total market potential. If the total market potential is $10,000, maybe that's not something that you want to pursue because there's not enough market there for you to go after. If you're looking at kind of venture capital or you're looking at angel investing, a lot of them use $50 million as kind of the total market potential. If you can't at least have a $50 million market, the idea might not be worth pursuing because it's not big enough. Now, that doesn't mean you can't build a great small business with something that doesn't have a $50 million market potential. But if you're going to try to build something from an idea or a product or a service where you're going to go out and raise capital, you need to have a very large market potential. That goes back to what we've just talked about. Is the market you've chosen large enough? Can you expand? Can I start in Houston, but you know what? Every city has moms and dads and children. Can I expand from where I'm at, which lengthens and makes my market bigger? Will people in the market be willing to buy your product? So that parent is talking to you and they're saying, man, it would be great to have this app. But when you start asking questions about, well, how much would you be willing to pay for this? Is this a service that you'd pay for? And you start figuring out, no, none of them want to pay for this service. They just wish it was available. Then you're getting a, no, they're not willing to buy my app or buy this product. While they want the problem solved, they don't want it solved enough that they're actually willing to pay for a solution to it. So it's important that you listen to that part. How do you do it? Again, talk to the people in the market. You can use tools like Google Trends, which will go out and tell you, different things from competitors, what the most searched terms are. Google has a ton of information available to help you do research. You can do industry reports. You can compare traffic of competitors' websites. You want to try to get away from market forecasts. People who are forecasting markets, market forecasts are all based on assumptions, which is why people who do stock market forecasting, sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. And the reason is because they're basing all of their stock price forecasts on where they think consumer behavior is going. And if those assumptions are wrong, then typically the stock doesn't follow. The more assumptions you make, the more risk you take, the more likely it is that what you think will happen will not happen. So try to avoid market forecasts because they're kind of just knee-deep in assumptions. Okay, so now we're validating the solution. We want to validate our solution last. So if you are talking to that mom and dad and you have this idea about building an app, you don't want to bring up at the beginning of the conversation with them, well, I had this idea for this app. Do you think you'd pay for that? That's just not going to get you anywhere. What you really wanted to talk to them about was, how do you do it now? How do you make play dates? What types of things do you use? What is working well for you when you do that? What doesn't work well for you when you do that? What do you wish was available for you? If they start saying things like, oh, I really wish there was this app on my phone that little heads would pop up and it would tell me all the children that are around in my son or daughter's same age group, and it had the contact information of the parents and whether they were open in the next 2 hours for a play date. If they start talking like that, well then, if that is what you are thinking about building as a solution, then that'll work. But you do this last, because if you lead with it, then what the solution that the actual customer has in mind won't matter anymore, because they won't remember it. Because now you've planted your idea in their head, and all they're going to try to do is iterate through your idea and tell you what's good about it or bad about it. But your idea might not even be the best solution to the problem. The customer may actually have a better one, which is why we do this last. Remember, validating solutions is not about your product. You're not trying to say, my product is X, is it good? You're trying to validate that there's an actual problem. The goal is there a problem, and is there a need for a potential product? And then, does my product fit the need? If you haven't identified a need, then there's no reason to identify a product. So make sure you understand, this is all about determining, is there a need for a product? Okay, here's some common mistakes. Most people assume they know the target market. Don't assume, prove, and I've already talked to you about this in this little module. We don't want to say, well, I think I know because I am one. Well, I'm a mom or I'm a dad, so I know what I wish my child had available. Well, great, you're one of all of the thousands and thousands of parents that are out there. But you may like a certain color shirt, but that doesn't mean everybody your age and your same gender wants that same color shirt. So you can't assume you know the target market. You have to ask questions and you have to validate. You have to take people's opinions on the product and you have to listen to them. You can't convince them that what they're telling you is wrong. I mean, try to think of this like you would think about a political dialogue. You know, it would be like a Democrat making a statement and then a Republican making a statement and them trying to convince each other that, no, well, what you think of my product's not right and what you think of your product's not right. And it's just not going to go anywhere. The goal is to actually listen to what they're saying about the product so that you can iterate and improve. Don't be afraid to change the product. You're going to hear people's opinions. You're going to hear what they think. You're going to hear potential solutions coming from these people. Don't be afraid to change the product. Okay, so let's talk about this. I have this great idea. We're going to do a small example. And you can see this big, large dog on the screen and Stitch Fix. And Stitch Fix is a clothing service that sends clothes to males and females. You know, you fill out a profile and then based on what you fill out, they mail it either monthly or quarterly or semi-annually, you get to pick. And so I had this great idea. I was like, well, if they can do this for humans, why can't they do it for dogs? So my business idea was, let's create Stitch Fix for dogs. Look at that, I spelled stitch wrong. So my assumptions I made. I believe there are no clothing options for larger dogs. In other words, a dog that weighs more than 40 pounds. I believe people with larger dogs are looking for sweaters for their dogs. I believe people with dogs prefer online shopping for their dogs. I believe people will pay at least $20 for a dog sweater. I believe people will want a whole wardrobe of stuff for their dogs. So these are all my assumptions I'm making around this Stitch Fix for dogs. I've said, this is all of the things that I think people want. So is this a good idea? Yes or no? Why or why not? Well, we don't know, right? Because we just learned, and all of you should be screaming in your heads, have you done any customer validation? To figure out if this is a good idea or not, we're supposed to go out and talk to customers. So why? We need to understand the market. I need to try to find patterns. I need to test all my assumptions. I need to understand my customers' priorities. I need to understand the market before I can determine, is Stitch Fix for dogs a good idea? And so these are the things that we've just talked about in this module. So step one, let me watch some customers purchase a product. Maybe let me go to a PetSmart and see, do big dog people buy anything for their dogs? Do they buy dog blankets? Step two, do some interviews. Let me talk to customers about how they solve the problem. How are you right now finding clothes for your dog? Maybe you'll find out that none of them do. And then I want to find any competitor in the space and I want to actually purchase product, from my competition or my status quo. I want to see, how are people doing it now? How are they currently solving this problem? So after I do all that, I want to make sure as I'm doing this for potential, step two interviews, my questions for the interviews. I want to make sure I talk in person. Notice that it's capitalized. Talk in person as much as possible. Try to figure out the customer's problem. Figure out the best way they want the problem solved. Ask good questions. I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. Avoid bad data and keep it casual. So the way I like to say this is, when you interview somebody and you're trying to do product discovery, you want to make it seem like you're having a drink on the back porch with someone and you're just talking about stuff. It's not formal. It's not stressful. It's casual. It's relaxed. You're just approaching people and trying to ask open-ended questions, not yes/no questions. Hi, one thing that works really well is you can talk about being a student. So here's some questions. And you'll see that using a student type approach actually will get people to listen. So maybe one of the questions would go something like this. Hello, my name is Steve. I'm a student at U of H. I'm doing research on dogs, interviewing dog owners. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? Right away, that's a yes or no question, which is probably not the best thing to ask. It would be much better for me to say, I noticed that you have a dog, especially if I was fishing where the fish are. I noticed that you have a dog. How much does your dog weigh? Now I'm trying to figure out if he's over 40 pounds. I'm doing some research, etc., right? Can you tell me a little about your dog? Open-ended question. Tell me a little about your dog. You're going to learn their weight, their size, how long they've owned them, right? We're trying to test whether the market conditions exist that I talked about. What do you buy for your dog? Don't say, do you buy food for your dog? Do you buy clothes for your dog? That's a yes or no. What do you buy for your dog? And they start talking about, well, I buy food and I buy treats and I buy this. Well, do you ever buy clothes? What types of clothes do you buy? What types of things have you bought them to stay warm with? Instead of saying, do you ever buy them a jacket? Or do you buy them a sweater? What types of things have you bought them? So you're trying to find purchasing patterns. How often are you buying, etc. When was the last time you bought something for your dog? This gets you to frequency. Have you ever bought dog shoes, sweaters, accessories? What was the process like? What did you like about the process? What did you not like about the process? What did you wish was better? In other words, how is the current process working for them? Do they have problems? Because you want to make sure your solution makes this part better for the customer. Where do you shop for your dog? In other words, do they only do it in person? Do they do it online? Is it a mix of both? Why are they doing that? Should be a great follow-on question if you're listening. Oh, it's for convenience, or it's because the store's next door. I want to feel and touch the stuff. Because if they say, I want to feel and touch it and make sure it fits perfect, well, then maybe something central to your model has to be easy returns if you're going to try to do an online solution, etc. So these are the types of open-ended questions that you would need to be building as you're validating your ideas. How do you choose these things for your dog? In other words, what's the process? How are they thinking about what they're buying? This gets you to, is it logical or is it emotional? How do you choose these things for your dog? So your goal, have customers validate your idea, or have the customer input help you pivot your idea, or help customer input help you figure out, I need a different solution entirely to the problem I found, or learn that there's just no market interest for your idea. So these are all ors. Some of them could be ors and ands. I might get some idea and pivot and figure out I have found another problem, or I might pivot and figure out I just need to modify. But the goal on this is you want to do this by asking questions. So you have an assignment related to this. I've put it up on Blackboard. I want you to list 3 places that would be ideal to find potential customers to talk and ask them questions regarding Stitch Fix for the dog's idea. That Stitch Fix for dogs idea. And you need to say why these are a good place to go look for them. Okay? Details are on Blackboard, and that's all that we have for this module. So until next time, thank you so much, and stay out of trouble and have a great day.